a lot of people have this thought process that, yeah, we'll work hard equals success. I mean, what's the question? And when you really look at that is when you start to kind of break it down a little bit more. So I
Yeah, I mean,
agree.
there's a lot of folks working hard. I mean, even I go to John Williams, there's others like, and there's a good quote actually. It was in the locker room when I was coaching too, and so folks listening, I coached at Tennessee for 8 years before I knew you, Sarah, and in the locker room, leaving out of the weight room was the work ethic. Basically, the synopsis was the work ethic and working hard does not guarantee anything. Failure to work hard does. No, very, very few people are successful, however you measure that, without working hard.
Yeah,
But
but
the
then
idea,
you have to redefine what working hard is. I mean,
Well,
you keep breaking it down. I mean, who says that, and what success is?
yep. Well, and that's the thing that the book, a lot of the athletes, this subjectivity of what it means to be a good athlete, of and to bring that for me as a professor now, I had a very wonderful conversation with a student that opened my eyes, because I realized, again, this is why positionality matters so much. Because I was not consciously thinking about it, I was implicitly imposing a conceptualization of what I thought a good student was supposed to be. And egotistically, I'm like, I was the best student, so all students should be like me and make these grades. And so this one student, beautiful meeting I had, they weren't doing well in the class. I emailed them and said, hey, I noticed you're struggling, challenge them a little bit. This was a master's student. And they came in and they said very eloquently, they were like, I don't need to make an A to prove that I know this stuff. And I was like, whoa, what? You don't
Yeah.
need to make an A? But I was so grateful that they brought that to the table, because they are so right. Just because they don't make an A does not mean that they're not a good student. And if anything, in that meeting, I left believing that that student was probably the best student in the class, because they didn't identify so heavily with they weren't extrinsically motivated to get the grade, so they actually were probably learning better than the students that were just chasing that A. And it made me think how much we do that with athletes, right? Like, and so I challenge coaches and anybody in positions of power to think, what does it mean to be a good athlete? And think about that for a second. And half the time, what we think means to be a good athlete is what we were as an athlete, right? Because we like to,
Yeah.
like, just ego boost. I was a
I'm
good
very
athlete.
confused. Are you saying that I don't have to be perfect? I don't understand the question. I mean,
No, you don't. And that's so novel too. I feel like some wires in people's brains are going to cross when they hear that, because we create such it's cyclical. I mean, G, you know this too, where it's this athlete turned coach. There's very little education there, so the athlete just starts coaching like they were coached, and then those coaches. I also brought this up in a webinar. That athlete turns coach, and now that coach is in a power position with a boss above them, so a sport administrator, something, and so they behave in that relationship with the sport administrator the same way they did in their coach athlete relationship, which means that they mimic these silent coachable behaviors with their boss. So the coach isn't even voicing their needs and wants to their sport admin, because you go with what you know. And so we have a huge cyclical problem of, so it's not just, this book is obviously very much on the surface, me advocating for athletes, giving them a platform for their voice to be heard. But when you read between the lines, and I really want to make this known, this book is also advocating for coaches, because I also feel like there's so much there where we have these athlete-centered coaching philosophies, which irks me to my core, because I'm like, when did the coach stop mattering? Like, we're like,
yeah,
they matter too. And they're just sitting there they're like, hello, I'm a human too. But also, how can we start empowering coaches to let their voice be heard? Right? Like, essentially, how can we start the conversation all these different ways? From the bottom up, from the side to side, from the top down, from the middle up. and teaching people how to do that in an eloquent, respectful, Brene Brown's vulnerable, humble way.
But I think that idea that the grade in the class, or that an athlete as well has to do every single little tiny thing well, they often don't. And it's not to say that anything goes and you don't have to work hard again in that, but let's also take it easy a little bit and practice some perhaps self-compassion, self-acceptance, and the realization that achieving greatness doesn't necessarily mean you're perfect. Nobody's perfect.
I wish I was in my classroom, because you say perfectionism, and I dealing with professional athletes, perfectionism is on a different level, right? Like, you've reached that level, and it's what is the difference between you and the next person next to you is that incremental, like, perfect. And so it's this, y-x axis of, we're not necessarily saying perfectionism isn't, I think a lot of coaches are like, well, we have, like, what are we doing then? Like, if we're not trying to be perfect. And so it's not sitting here saying we need to get rid of striving for something greater. But if perfectionism is there in the absence of compassion, and so on that XY axis is I'll have athletes, when I'm doing mental performance consulting with them, I'll say, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10 on this X axis, I want you to tell me, put a little dot on how perfectionistic you are. And they'll usually put it at a 10 because they think that's what they're supposed to do. And they think their coach is like watching, like they constantly have their coach, like Foucault, like that surveillance thing
of the
on.
coach. He's always looking.
Oh no,
Yeah, and so I know I had to bring it up. That's how I put it in there. And so that they have their surveillance. They're like, oh, I think if the coach was watching, they'd be so proud that I put a 10 out of 10 on perfectionism here. And then I say, okay, now I want you to put a dot on the y-axis here, from 1 to 10. How compassionate are you? And they're like, what? I have athletes who are like, what does this have to do with anything? And that also depends on gender a lot of times, like men especially, like, why are you talking about compassion? That has no place in sport. And it's usually low. It's like a 1 or 2. And I tell them right there, so what we have is a discrepancy of the lower your compassion and the higher your perfectionism, the worse you're going to do. Because you need that compassion in order to have short-term memory loss, right? But if you don't have that compassion, if we don't build that compassion muscle, then your perfectionism is going to lead to burnout. But if we have high compassion, high perfectionism, then that comes together to be this optimal level of performance. So I really like to tell coaches, like, we're not trying to say we don't want you to strive for being the best you can be. I don't want to say strive to be perfect. But striving, getting better, right? Like, as human beings, we have that need, to get better, to grow.
It's like
And
you're
we need to
saying,
be compassionate with ourselves.
what does that perfectionist orientation do? And if it leads you to, overtrain, hate yourself, hate the sport, hate your body, hate your coach, whatever it might be, that's the outcome. That's what is the effect of it having, so you can, try to achieve without beating yourself up and, suffering in those sorts of ways and being sadistic about it.
Exactly. And to couple this with need achievement theory, which is one of the theories on motivation, is that if you preach high perfectionism and you don't also encourage compassion in an athlete, or build that compassion muscle, what happens is you actually lead to an athlete performing in order to avoid failure, which leads them to perform in such a way that they want to avoid failure, meaning they want to avoid the emotions associated with it, such as embarrassment or disappointment from a parent or coach, which leads them to behaviors such as not taking the risk necessary in order to, or not leaning into being creative to make that play, to make the goal, to get the score. And so as we build that compassion muscle and the perfection, right? Like, they're both high, we shift them into, via need achievement theory, into approaching success mindset, which leads them to, I'm expecting to perform well, thus I'm trying to approach the pride I'm going to feel when I win, which leads them to taking, when I say riskier behavior, that means doing the creative play in the game that's like all dropping, and they make the basket and they win the game. So that's just couching that within one theory. This can be couched within many, but
There's also, I think, a big difference between trying to reach perfection and expecting it. If you expect perfection, you don't achieve anything ever. It's always failure. And I
Yeah.
think that's where I've seen a lot of the youth athletes going, and it's very concerning.
Yes, very much so. And I mean, and I'm a very transparent person. I'm in counseling now to unpack how sport has abused me. And that being one of the things that I'm having, right? Oh, I see you. I am, because I had to come, and this happened by writing this book, by writing Dear Coach, because I started empathizing with the athletes, feeling the weight of it all. And I went to my counselor. Her name's Jess. I always say I need to go instead of digest that, I say digest it. And going to her, and I'm just like, can we talk about how sport has abused me? I mean, it has led to a lot of, depression and just this, I always feel like I can't do enough. And I think there's so many athletes out there, like right now we're seeing such a mental health crisis. And a lot of it is because of this, amongst other things. But it's not just athletes, a mental health crisis amongst athletes. It's a mental health crisis amongst coaches, sport administrator. I mean, the whole gamut of people, because it's a cyclical athlete turned coach turned sport administrator. And it's just, where are the resources for the coaches and the sport admin too?
Mm-hmm. Do you think it's more of, in reading the letters, do you think it's sport and the way we do it, or is it the coaches and the way that they're being developed, or probably combination?
I think I'm a very both and person. And the first thing I'll say about my book, I by no means, I don't think I'm you said it too, G. Yeah, I love how you keep
Wait, gee, is
popping it
that
up
the
there.
book?
Yeah.
Share it again.
For those that are
Maybe,
watching at
maybe
home,
not.
that's the book.
um, I think, G, you said it earlier. You're like, I'm one person, one perspective, and so the book itself, I just wanted to start a conversation, and all of us, it's going to take all of us being a part of this conversation to make this change. Not just a select few, not just a bunch of white people in a room, right? Like, it's going to take multiple bodies, multiple voices, years of us making this change. I think that it is a development issue. It's an education issue. But we also have to understand education has its, so for us, let's say people are like, okay, well, we need to just mandate education. Well, that also has privilege attached to it. Because you have to get access to education, and there's money involved, and then we're dealing with classism at that point. So it's a lot deeper than just saying, oh, here's the answer, let's do that. But I think development is one. But I do think, just from a systemic, we need to start getting creative, and I really want to permit people to start imagining again. Just let's imagine that world, and be like the kids we were and the creators that we were, and imagining a world of, Martin Luther King, I have a dream speech type thing, where everybody feels safe. And sport is a microcosm of the larger society. So how can we make sure that sport is, I would love if sport could be a leader in making that change in the larger scheme of things.
It's a big ask, I think, from sport on that regard, because too, right, in the coaching education world and the curriculums and everything around it that's related to it, imagination, creativity, freedom, exploration, some sort of authenticity, and doing it relationally is not something that is well discussed or talked about, encouraged, supported, and that goes back to the background of, the coach centered, disciplinary production, win at all costs, profit at all costs, monopolize youth at all costs, economically exploit any athlete and the teams that we can for somebody, or right, to control more profit. The idea that we're going to somehow, right, like, we're all liberated and empowered to be imaginative and free and creative is a big ask for that particular world. And I don't like to be cynical either, but I understand the people that are like, competitive sport can't do that.
Yeah.
Too big of an ask.
Yeah, and I do. And I want to couch that within saying, I do understand that's a big ask, and I don't want that ask to be done tomorrow. Like I think we get in sport this immediate microwave, like this needs to happen immediately. And this, I'm so glad you brought that up, G, because we live in an echo chamber. Every system live right. Like we have coaches teaching coaches. I was an athlete. Here we are talking about sport, and my mind has started becoming like talking about tap into your imagination. So I have a colleague, Dr. George McConnell, who is a professor, assistant professor of theater. And so I've been speaking to him about my book. And so he has been teaching me so many different theater theories. And I'm like, wow, like how much that could inform sport. I have a colleague, Dr. Johnson Ferris, that's in counselor education. And I'll be talking about my book. And he's like, oh, like it sounds like this particular theory or Carl Rogers' work, different. It's like, how wonderful would it be? And this is just me dreaming for a moment. How wonderful would it be to be able to get around a table, not just of diverse voices within sport, but diverse voices from different fields, and how we could help each other heal.
I went over to the theater department years ago too and created a different rubric because I wanted to bring role playing into the classroom.
Yes.
To bring some of these things to life, because it feels so abstract or like, oh, I kind of get it, but like, no. Let's actually now micro coach it. Let's role play it, and then we'll debrief it in class. And it just is so much more powerful too. Like you did. I mean, if you have to experience or observe, something like abusive coaching behavior, or very degrading coaching behavior, or it could be a different context of talking to the media, before a game, or responding to a big political thing. We've seen coaches do that nowadays. When you have to practice those things and do it, that's different than just talking about it or reading about it, obviously.
For sure. Yeah. And that's a great point. None of these systems that I'm talking about, I make a suggestion in the book about how I think we need to have a better relationship between academia and athletics. And then I also make the point of, I'm not saying academia, we have our own like issues. We're not perfect either. But to me, if nobody's perfect, let's all just let's just hold hand, like let's just heal together, right? Like we don't have to be in our silos. One isolation is what leads to these detrimental outcomes. And so the more isolated we feel, the less that we're actually going to make advancements and heal. Trauma, one of the biggest things I ever learned in my own counseling experience for me personally, but just even in the clinical classes I've taken, is most trauma is caused in relationship. Thus, most oftentimes trauma will only heal in relationship. And so it's not saying, oh, athletics needs to come to academia because we have all the answers and we're perfect in our ivory towers, but just realizing we are all broken. So let's come together and not isolate ourselves so that we can heal together, because this trauma that we're experiencing collectively was birthed by a relationship, and thus we can only heal in relationship. And so really having a humble spirit about us when we do it. And I worked with my editor a lot in writing Dear Coach, because to be very frank, this book went through so many different drafts. It started out very angry, rightfully so. I was very angry when I started writing it. It was a very cathartic experience for me. But I needed to start that way. I needed to be raw first. And Amanda Rooker, my editor, is a beautiful human being. I told her, I was like, you're kind of my counselor. Because I said, I know this is angry. Can you help me keep the spirit of the message, but do it in a more eloquent calling in rather than calling out way?
Yeah.
And so just the process of writing this book was healing for me, because I've learned, and I want to permit everybody listening to this, it's okay if, you're angry at somebody to begin with, right? Write that letter, get it all out, be raw about it, cry about it, snot about it, whatever. And then bring in people to help you revise your message before you walk into the office maybe and give it. Have that accountability group that can help you deliver your message out of love instead of out of hate. because it'll be better better received.
It's one of the main reasons Dr. G and I have started this podcast and YouTube videos, is because we want to get people together who don't usually talk and they don't usually listen to each other. And we want to encourage more communication. And we're working on platforms to do that, to bring people together from research, from practice, from every direction. So we're definitely on the same page.
Wonderful.
I have a very strong right background in football, strength conditioning, right. You basically called me out earlier. People like me, right? The white heterosexual male, middle-aged, privilege. Okay. And I've written about it. So yes, that's me. But the hegemonic masculinity and the piece too, like I still, and I want to bring this up to talk about that, but then invite other people into the conversation though. When I still hear people talk about healing and this kind of like, therapy and all this invites you into the conversation. I still, right. A part of me is just like, oh boy, here we go.
Yeah.
Right. What is that? Right. If I listen to it, and usually I listen to it, okay, are they done yet? But when you do, I want to stop, others that are listening, like, think about that. Think about why are you like that? Why is that your reaction? It's not some I don't think it's some natural biological reason. But when you look at your, the values and look at, well, don't you want also peace and healing and functioning and not to hurt so many times, right? Like you don't have to repeat the cycle, and others have talked about that, right? Like you don't have to carry on your abuse if you were, and you don't have to, when a coach degraded you or yelled at you or you experienced a physical trauma, like we can try to make the world a more caring, one of the things too that shocked us on the show is we constantly hear the word love.
Mhm.
We don't even prompt it and it comes up.
But yet we're
know?
so hesitant to bring it to, like we'll say it in a safe space like this, because you all have done a great job of building this, but then to walk into, I mean, as a woman, if I walk into a room, I think about the University of Tennessee Athletic Department and walking into their meeting room with the football coaches, and I'm like, hey, everybody, like we're going to talk about love today. Like, okay. But let's call it what it is. And I'm getting so like, let's call abuse what it is. Let's call love what it is. Like, I think we're eggshells walking around it.
Yeah, it's tough, like you said too, because so many, especially in football, and I've seen those guys at Tennessee that I've coached normalize abuse. And right, and they tell you things like, well, you just got to get tougher. That's just how it's going to be. People are going to get on your butt about various things, and you're going to have to suck it up and deal with it. And you just sit there and go, man, this is how masculinity and violence and hate and this whole kind of, the cloak of the work ethic, and this is the way the world is, that interferes with the way that the world could be and should be, and more healing and more functioning for people to combat those mental health, suicidal ideation, the self-harm that happens. And we just sat there and go, yeah, I guess that does happen, but I'm not sure how to fix it,
So the book actually started out, one of the first drafts is there were less letters in it and more of me talking. And I'll be honest with you all, I was teaching a methods of coaching class. And I was like, like if you're going to be a future coach, you got to care about what the athlete says, and you got to remove yourself more and let the athlete talk more. In the middle of me speaking, I paused, and the students thought like I just forgot how to speak. And I said, oh my God, I'm doing it. I'm doing it. And they were like, what the heck? She's going crazy. And I said, y'all, I got to out myself right now. And I said, everything I'm telling you right now in this class not to do, I'm doing it in my book. In that because what I was doing, I'd give this is my ego, I would give a letter and then I would be like, now this is what you need to get out of the letter. And here's all the research for it and blah, blah, blah. And so as I'm telling them this, it hit me like a sack of bricks in the middle of class. And I called Amanda, my editor, after. I was like, we got to completely rewrite this book. I got to get more letters. I got to shut up more. I got to delete all this stuff I've been working on for the last year and just let the athlete's voice do the talking, which is now where the book is at, where it's a letter and then I have reflection questions. Because I'm obviously, if I read, so one of my favorite quotes is, a book read by 1,000 different people is 1,000 different books. each letter read by 1,000 different people is 1,000 different letters, because every person's going to interact with that letter differently based on their positionality, their life experiences, all of that. And so I was like, I got to shut up more, because I'm basically I'm perpetuating the problem again, which is trying to deduce the reader's body into the vision, into the message I'm trying to push forward. And so now the final version is these voices, and then bringing coaches into the conversation, bringing sport administrators in the conversation, having these activities that walk coaches and sport administrators through of like, okay, now what about your voice? And so I obviously have some points in there where I'm giving my 2 cents and sharing some research and stuff, so I don't completely mute myself. But again, I think it's about all of us being a part of the conversation, and me being somebody that's very passionate about sparking it.
Will you be doing a similar thing in the book that you're working on now that's about to come out?
Yes. So I kind of, when I was doing Dear Coach, it was something that I was still passionate about, which is the parent athlete relationship, which is obviously my master's degree. I was researching that, and so I want to do a very similar format with, dear sport parent, this is what I wish I could have told you. And really, there's not a lot of literature out there for that educates parents on what athletes want from you. And I most times I have coaches, if I'm working with them, they're like, yeah, like, can you help us with X, Y, and Z? But we really need your help with knowing how to deal with parents, and then, or an athlete will come to me with mental performance concerns. And when we get to the root of it, we realize, oh, it's their parent really controlling, they're in their ear. And so I'm really hoping to start that dialogue too, and bringing parents into the conversation, because there's not a lot of education out there. It's really just a lot of coaches are like, stay away, don't come in. Or there's the parent coach situation, the parent that's coaching the kids. So,
You've got maybe 10, 50, 100 kids on the team, or kids, right? Could be adults. You've got multiple coaches, or maybe just a couple coaches. You got all these parents. What everybody expects and needs and wants is really so complicated. And oftentimes we reduce it to, we'll have the coach parent meeting and tell the parents how you roll. And that's, you're going to set the bar, but that also isn't, the be all end all. So.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is understanding we have a long way to go. And one of the things I'm having to unlearn is we like that microwave approach. If you're not producing the results quick enough, you'll get cut type thing. And really getting comfortable with just understanding that I might not have the privilege of seeing the changes I would like to see within my lifetime. But I do feel very honored to be somebody that is hopefully using uh, the right kind of water to water that tree, that it'll provide shade later for bodies, beyond my generation. And so becoming comfortable in that, and knowing that there's so many other people out there too, that I think oftentimes the media likes to make it seem like we're more divided than we are. I think that there is some division, but the more I talk to so many people, the more I realize we're all kind of on the same, like, oh, okay, yeah, we're all thinking the same thing, and we're wanting to move in the same direction. And so being proactive with that. One other thing I do want to make a mention of that I speak about in the book that I'm very passionate about is we have a lot of things. So I'll use NCAA, for example. There's a lot of athlete mental health initiatives. And I think one of the things, and there was a very profound moment that I wrote about in the book. As I started reading between the lines, I started realizing that how much coaches don't feel seen. They're working more hours than these athletes are sometimes. My first question is why? Like, why do we have to practice as much as we do? Why do we have to, like, why is this the norm? So I'll just throw that out there for people to think about. But another thing too is I think the subtext we're writing in sport is that everything starts and stops with the athlete, the mental health, the mental performance, They're the ones that are the bodies that can make the scores, that can do everything, and that the coaches are just, they're neglected. So we are abusing athlete or coaches' bodies through neglect. They are cultural beings. They are emotional, mental beings that are. And I remember sitting at this table talking about this with a group of coaches and saying, "What about your mental health?" And one of them, and who was a male, just tears started streaming down his face. And he said, "I've never thought about that, but you're right." And just started opening up about, like, I've been struggling to try to keep my family happy, but I'm working so much, and then I'm dealing with this, and there's a sickness in the family. And then that coach sharing, another coach started to share, tears were flowing, and I'm like, we have some hurt people that are trying not to hurt people, right? Coaches that are trying not to hurt athletes, but it's hard to not unintentionally hurt somebody when you yourself are hurting and you're neglected and you're not being seen for the person that you are. And so I say that, I mean, coaches, I see you, and I'm not just advocating for athletes, but I'm advocating for you, sport administrators too. Like, they are cultural beings. They have things going on at home, but in sport, to be coachable means to shut up and just do what you're told. Don't whine, don't complain, shove the emotion away. And we have a lot of hurt people in sport that are hurting others, and it hurts them to know that they're hurting others. And so it's just this huge, so how can we open up the mental health initiatives for everybody, and really see all bodies that are all stakeholders' bodies, not just athletes?
That's it.
That is awesome. And we obviously have to have you come back the minute that you want to, and the book comes out, because we have so much more to talk about. But of course, it's that time, and we have to start wrapping up. I have a quote. G loves this part of the show. I have a quote. Now you guys have to guess, and this is kind of a layup, I have to tell you. Who said this? A coach must never forget that he is a leader and not merely a person with authority. Oh, I thought it was a layup. Maybe it's not.
This is a layup. I'll be honest with you. I got stuck on you saying he when referring to coach. Like, the gendered language kind of caught me a little.
Uh-oh.
But that's fine. It's a quote. So, John Wooden.
Oh yeah. Well, that gave it away too, because it showed the age of it too. Yes, it is John Wooden. So anyway, I like that one. I like his other one that said, a good coach can change a game. A great coach can change a life. That's one of my other favorites.
So anytime you say it's a layup, I'll know to just go with John Wooden.
Well, I mean, basically, there are classes in coach education. I mean, I'm floored that G did not know immediately. I think he was trying to give you a chance.
Look, I'm the one other thing you need to know about me. Do not take me to a trivia night, because I'll run the answers up to the people, but I'm not a good trivia person, and this is why.
I want to do one thing before we're going to do the Sara story real quick.
We have to.
Oh, the coach.
I got to do one thing before we do it too, Sara. When you were talking just now, before we did the quote thing, I was thinking about this before the show. I want to share with you my appreciation for you speaking, and you're speaking your truth to power. You, in spite of my, or perhaps because of my influence on you as well, though, too, in our interaction from your dissertation days, you did what you wanted to do. You wrote the book. You didn't do the traditional thing after the dissertation. You wrote this book. You just spoke even more, really, poetry, that the letters and speaking that rawness and that narrative and really going down that road is not what is commonly accepted or valued or praised in higher education. And yet yesterday or 2 days, we're filming this or we're recording in January, right? So it's around the time of the inauguration. Nobody's going to lose their mind if I say that. One of the things we just did too was celebrate a young African-American, Amanda Gorman, in her poetry. And I listened to multiple videos after being exposed to it, went back and read more things. Those are sort of the things too that I think can help coaches, our whole sport community. And those are the sort of things that we can speak from our hearts and our lived experiences that can touch us deeply and hopefully change the world for better. So I applaud you for doing that and following your dreams and passions.
Thank you. I'm trying not to start bawling right now. I told you I might bring the theatrics. That means a lot coming from you, G. A lot. So thank you.
All right, now do the story.
Okay, the story.
Right
Gosh, a story about a coach.
It can be good or bad, or a little bit of both, but a story that you remember that affected you.
I'm saying, right? Like you got all those stories from the book too. I mean, there's whatever.
That's what
30
I'm
or
saying.
so
I feel like I'm
stories.
so congested right now
Right.
on a story from a coach. I'll give you this story. Actually, it was my strong woman coach, Jonathan Moorhead out of Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm going to send him this. So this is a great story. Again, I'm doing this kind of recreational sport. So this is outside of, like, it's still competitive, but I'm not necessarily a part of an organization, if you will. And I will forever remember coming to practice or to training one day, and we're getting closer. I realize, like, the events are pulling a 10,000-pound truck, the Atlas stones, all these things. And I'm like, Jonathan, per sport psych, like, I know games day approach, right? Like, you gotta pull the truck in order to, and so I would come in with these crazy ideas, and I was like, hey, I have a forerunner. I was like, can we just do laps around the gym of me pushing and pulling my forerunner? And he was always like, he would never say no to anything I said. And I would have these crazy ideas of just like, hey, like, I saw on the corner of, like, I-40 and this road, like, a bunch of kegs. Can we just, like, see if those are available and go pick them up and throw them somewhere, And he was like, yes. Like, and we would just impromptu get in the car and go, like, have a strong woman training on this. So it was just, he was championed so much me as a person, and just went with, like, my suggestions on, like, I'm all in, I'm passionate. And so that to me was such a beautiful coach athlete relationship, and why I think, myself and Jess thrived when we competed, because we were just having fun. We were, like, on the playground, it was just like, oh yeah, like, let's go throw this heavy stuff over our head. And sometimes there was no rhyme or reason to it, and it didn't really mimic anything, but he created such a safe environment for us to just have fun. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Sarah. It's been such a pleasure. We really appreciate it. And thanks for everyone for tuning in. We appreciate the love. Make sure to click the subscribe button and hit the bell so you don't miss the next episode of Spotlight Sport Report. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to let us know what you think in the comments, and join in the conversation around this topic and more in the forum.